Hey y'all, it's your girl, Dr. J, back with another episode of Let It Flow with Dr. J. One of the things God has been speaking to me about is trusting Him even in the wilderness. He's been speaking to me about this because I have been dealing with a wilderness season in my own life, and I have come across so many people who are also in a wilderness season. By definition, the wilderness is an uncultivated, uninhabited, and inhospitable region. It's a neglected or abandoned area of town and can be considered an extremely difficult place to live in because there's really nothing there. The wilderness is a place where you look out and you can't see anything stirring. You search, but there's nothing that makes it feel like a place you desire to be in or a place where it feels like you have all that you need. But the other part is the wilderness can also be a season of your life, a season that may feel uncomfortable, isolated, scary, and sometimes surreal. This can be a season where you feel like you are in this uncultivated, uninhabited, and inhospitable place where you feel abandoned and like no one understands where you are, how you feel, or what you need. A season where you feel like you spend most of your time searching, crying, stressing, worrying, and afraid that what you're experiencing now is all that life will be. This is a season where you can feel stretched from all sides, and day in and day out, you are trying to find ways to get yourself out of the wilderness because it's not a place you want to be in. It doesn't feel good. And quite frankly, you don't like being there. Trust me, I understand. I've been in a wilderness season more than once, and I know the thoughts that creep into your mind that make you feel like this cannot be life. But the good thing about the wilderness is that while it may feel uncomfortable, stressful, and sometimes challenging to navigate, it's just a season. And it's actually a place where you can choose to view things positively instead of negatively. You see, the wilderness, this is where our faith is tested. The wilderness is where we begin to stretch, grow, and develop. It's a place where we must have total dependency on God to make a way. A place where we must trust that no matter what it feels like, no matter what it looks like, no matter how hard it gets, and no matter how many sacrifices we must make, we're still going to trust God. We're still going to remember the promises He has made and the true nature of His character. We're still going to remember all that God has done for us every time He has shown up, every time He has worked it out in the past, and every time the promises He has made to us have come true, even in the wilderness. And somebody watching this may be saying, now, Dr. J, you don't know how hard it has been for me. You don't know the struggles I've had to endure. You don't know how it feels to be where I am right now, a place where I have lost all hope, a place where I don't see how God is going to make a way for me, a place where I have been praying, crying, believing, and trusting, but nothing has moved. Nothing has changed in my life. In fact, I feel like things have gotten worse and I don't see an end to this pain in sight. I'm tired of struggling. I'm tired of being tested. I'm tired of feeling like I'm on this island by myself where nobody sees or hears me. I'm just tired of feeling like this, and I don't know how much more of this I can take. I don't know how many more days I can get up and see my accounts in the negative. I don't know how many more days I can deal with this sickness in my body or deal with my crazy family, the mess on my job, or even issues with unemployment where I'm getting rejection after rejection, no after no, even for stuff I know that I'm qualified for. The price of almost everything going up beyond what I can afford, or even dealing with a spouse that treats me like I'm nothing, or that child's mother or child's father that all of a sudden feels like they have amnesia, like we don't have a child together that we're responsible for taking care of. I just don't know how much more of this I can take. You may even be saying, if God doesn't show up right now, I'm going to lose my mind. But I came to remind you that while the wilderness is a season that none of us likes to go through, it is still only a season. And it is one that we must go through for various reasons. There are valuable lessons that we learn in the wilderness, lessons that we cannot learn when everything is going well, lessons that we cannot learn when our money is good, our family is acting right, our careers are taking off, and everything is just peachy. There are some lessons that we learn only in the wilderness. There are some things that only the wilderness can help us grow through, stretch through, persevere through, and strengthen our faith walk. There are some things that we must go through to get all of that stuff that's in us that needs to come out, purged out of us. And sometimes there are some things that we have to go through to make sure that we get all that God has promised for us to have in our lives. And in my wilderness season, I'll be honest, there's quite a few scriptures and stories, or how I view them, testimonials that I like to read to help me keep pushing forward. And one of those stories is about Joseph. The story of Joseph is one that confirms that God is with us even in the wilderness. In Genesis chapter 37, Joseph had a dream that he shared with his brothers, and they already didn't like him because he was his father's favorite son. And I'm sure Joseph may have had some sense that his brothers didn't like him. They probably treated him funny or acted, a little funky with him. But being who Joseph was, being young, and probably in all the excitement about the dream that he told his brothers about his dream anyway. He told them that in his dream, they were binding sheaves in the field, and his sheaf arose and stood upright, and the sheaves of his brothers stood all around and bowed down to Joseph's sheaf. His brothers didn't like it, needless to say, and they devised a scheme to get rid of Joseph, and Joseph didn't even see it coming. The original plot was to kill him by leaving him in a pit that he couldn't get out of. But one of his brothers said, "No, let's not do that. Let's not leave him in a pit we've thrown for him. Let's not have our brother's blood on our hands. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and tell our pops that he was eaten by a beast." So basically, they gonna let daddy know something got your boy, something ate your son out there. It devoured him. We don't know what happened, but he gone. So Joseph went from dwelling in his father's house and being his favorite son to being thrown in a pit and left for dead, to being taken out of the pit, to be sold into slavery. Then he was sold again, but he was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and a captain of the guard. From this portion alone, Joseph's story seemed to go from bad to worse. But in chapter 39, verse 2, and this is a but God moment, it says that the Lord was with Joseph and he was a successful man. It goes on to say that his master saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord made all he did prosper in his hands. Seeing this, the master made Joseph overseer of his house, and all that he had was put under Joseph's authority. The only thing that Joseph could not touch was Potiphar's wife. So it looked like things were starting to look up for Joseph while he was in the wilderness and enslaved because of his brothers. But then Potiphar's wife, here she come. She liked what she saw, or in other words, she thought Joseph looked good and she wanted a piece of that. But Joseph wouldn't budge. So she plotted against Joseph to sleep with him. But Joseph said, "No, shouty, I'm not going out like that, because I was already told, I was forewarned not to touch you." And he fled before she could get him into her bed. But Potiphar's wife lied on Joseph and said he tried to take her goodies. And Joseph was thrown into prison. But even in prison, another but God moment, Joseph found favor and was put in charge in that space as well. Joseph was blessed while in prison, and he found favor in the sight of Pharaoh, who was higher than Potiphar, because he helped Pharaoh's baker and butler, who were also in prison, interpret their dreams. They in jail for something else. Pharaoh had thrown them in jail, and they had dreams, and they couldn't figure out what those dreams meant. And Joseph's like, "I got you. Let me interpret it for you." and he told them what their dreams meant. Because you see, God gave Joseph a gift that he used in the wilderness to help others. And one of those people remembered Joseph. It might have been 2 years later, not immediately like it was supposed to be when they got out of jail, but 2 years later, when Pharaoh was over there struggling with understanding his dreams. So he had some stuff going on. Joseph's name was put in the mouth of the butler, who told it to who they considered to be the highest person in the land, or in other words, the man with the power. So now Joseph goes from his father's house to the pit, to being sold into slavery, to being put in charge while enslaved, to being lied on and thrown into prison, to being favored in prison, to interpreting dreams, to being over Pharaoh's house and ruling over all his people. Then after all of this, so all of these things that happened, a famine in the land brought Joseph's brothers back to him. And they ended up doing the very thing that Joseph told them they would do from his dream. They bowed before him. There's so much more to Joseph's story, but just this part alone shows us how God still shows up and how he's still with us even in the wilderness. It shows us that God's grace, favor, and faithfulness was still with Joseph. It also shows us that God gave Joseph a dream, but he didn't tell him how he was going to get there. Joseph wasn't told of the hardships he would have to face. He wasn't told about the betrayal, the lies, the hurt, the discomfort, or the things he would have to go through and grow through on his journey. He wasn't told that it would be easy. He wasn't told that his situation wouldn't be difficult, lonely at times, or painful. God never said that Joseph wouldn't have a few detours to take, or that he would have to go through the wilderness, so a wilderness season, before he could reap the blessings God had for him. God gave Joseph a vision through his dream, and that was it. However, Joseph learned, he grew, he served, he endured, he had a positive attitude, and he persevered and made it through the wilderness. At any point, Joseph could have said, "This is too much. It's too hard. It don't feel good." And he could have said, "I'm not taking this anymore, and I'm just going to give up on receiving the blessing that God has for me." But instead, Joseph kept doing his best in every situation he was placed in, even when it kept going from bad to worse. And this is what we must do. We must remember who God is, the promises he has made to us, and trust that no matter how hard it gets or what the situation looks like, God is still with us and he will never leave us nor forsake us. God will allow us to go through some trials and tribulations to strengthen us. He will allow us to go through tests to strengthen our faith, trust, hope, and belief in him and his ability to love, provide, protect, and care for us. He will allow us to go through some things that may seem like it's a curse rather than a blessing. But while we are being strengthened and prepared for what he has for us, we are also put in situations to bless and help others at the same time. Because what Joseph went through was never a surprise to God. At no point did God say, "Oh, shoot, they snuck that one in on me. I didn't see that coming. Let me figure out how I'm going to get Joseph out of this mess." God already knew what Joseph would have to deal with, and he kept him every step of the way. He sustained him. God made everything in his hand prosper and gave him favor with folks he never would have had favor with without God, and he positioned him to be a blessing to the people around him. The same Joseph that was envied by his brothers was the same Joseph that provided for them in their wilderness season. And they didn't even know it at first. God had changed and blessed Joseph so much that he was unrecognizable to the people who plotted and schemed against him. God placed his favor on Joseph and caused everyone around him to see that the Lord was with him. And he did this in Joseph's wilderness season, a season where the odds were against him, but God was with him. So we must understand that God sometimes will use what we go through and what we are meant to grow through to not only bless us, strengthen us, change us, help us, but to bless the people around us, even the ones who cannot stand us and those who are not deserving of our kindness, those who have mistreated us, and we don't even deserve to have mercy on them. They don't even deserve for us to be good to them. We must remember that even in the wilderness, God is still on the throne. He is still in control. He still cares deeply for us. And there are things that we must learn and tests that we must pass to reap all that God has for us and what He has promised us. Don't discredit your wilderness season. Don't dismiss this part of your process or your journey because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like, especially if God gave you a vision or a dream, but He didn't tell you, like, you're going to have to go through these detours, these ups and downs, these ebbs and flows. Don't give up. Don't give up because you don't see a way out. Instead, trust that God knows the plans that He has for your life, and He will turn things around for you in due season. Trust that God has your life in His hands and that nothing that you are going through is in vain or a surprise to God. Lean into God and allow Him to show you what He needs you to learn or understand. Look for ways to bless and serve others and believe that God is going to make a way. Know that what God said in Isaiah 43:19 also holds true for you. He will do a new thing. He will make a road in the wilderness. And we already know what the wilderness means. So He will make a road in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. He's going to supply all of your needs. So the same way that God blessed, protected, cared for, and provided for Joseph in the wilderness, He will do the same for you. Just stay in faith and trust that God has your back. He loves you and cares for you, and He will help you through your wilderness season, and He's going to position you to reap the blessings He has for your life. All right, y'all. I hope this message blesses you and it reaches you where you are at your point of need. As always, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And peace and love, y'all. It's your girl, Dr. J.